Hey, it's Conrad Thompson, and you're listening to Grilling JR with the voice of professional wrestling, Mr. Jim Ross. Jim, how are you, man?
I'm good, Conrad. You know, I'm in Oklahoma, so things are, at least I'm starting out the morning early and feeling good.
That's exactly right. We normally drop to you early Thursday morning every week. We're a little late because we're recording on Thursday morning because we wanted to be able to catch up with Jim after he made his return to AEW last night. AEW Dynamite was in Oklahoma City, and so was the voice of wrestling. And Jim, you got an opportunity to call the main event.
Yeah.
I want to play a little bit of a clip, but how did this come together? Did you know you were making your return last night, or?
I knew that when Oklahoma City was booked, that I would go to the show if I was able, healthy enough, and felt well enough, because I would be here for the holidays for my grandkids and my daughters. So I just sent out a tweet casually saying, you know, look forward to seeing all the guys that, because I was going to do a little drive-by in the afternoon and say hello to everybody.
Right.
Which I was perfectly fine doing. But then it kind of grew into a booking idea, apparently. And the response on social media, on Twitter especially, was overwhelming. And that influences a lot of people in their decision-making sometimes. So all of a sudden it became a thing. And then Tony promoted it on his piece of business, and Tony Khan obviously liked the idea. I didn't know until we started to walk out before my music played that he was going to introduce me. He just came up. He wanted to do it. So cool. And so that's how that started. And then I got to go call a really good match. Those two guys are really good talents. I mean, no matter what company you're with and all that bullshit, these guys can main event with any company in the world. Jay White and John Moxley, anywhere. And, you know, AEW's got them, and they're lucky to have them. And I thought those guys really maximized their minutes on Wednesday night.
What a return it was. We've got a clip. I think it's probably got to be one of the bigger pops of the night. Let's take a listen.
Nice music.
Jim, after all this time at home, isolated by yourself, working on getting better, finally back and in your hometown to get a welcome like that, man, that's got to make you feel good, does it not?
Good medicine, Conrad. That's good medicine, my friend. Yeah, it was cool. It was really cool. It takes you back. It's nostalgic in a way. It's emotional in a way, in a lot of ways. But it was fun. It was fun. And Tony put me in a position to call the main event, which if I had to pick one match on the show to call, it's not just because it was the main event, but because it was Moxley and that kid's name. What's his name again?
Jay White.
Jay White, yeah. It's early morning, folks. I haven't fully consumed my gallon of coffee yet, but I'm working on it. Anyway, it was a good night. I saw Dean Malenko. Malenko's had some health issues, and I saw him there. And he had brain surgery.
Oh, wow. I had no idea.
And it stops his shakes from the Parkinson's. He's had the surgery.
Wow, that's fantastic. Well, that's great news.
Yeah, he's such a sweetheart of a guy. He's one of those unsung guys that's such an MVP at AEW because of his guidance, his coaching. He encourages the talents to bring with them to him what they want to do or what they've been loosely structured to do. you're going over, this guy's whatever. And then he helps them. He contributes, it's teaching. All that is coaching. And he's really, really good at it. I also saw Scotty Too Hottie there, Scott Garland. I guess he's going to contribute as a producer.
Oh, wow. I hadn't heard that.
Yeah, he was there. Good kid. I like him. I hired him way back in the day. Him and Brian Christopher made a good tag team.
Yeah.
Good mid-card babyface tag team. Always good on the card. Both very talented. A lot of people don't realize just how talented Brian Christopher was, but unfortunately, some of the other issues in his life distracted many fans from acknowledging that or letting that soak in. Really, really good. So he and Scotty blended well. So, but I'm glad he's there. He'll do a good job. He'll have young ideas. He's an old school at heart, old soul type thing. So that's a great get by Tony Khan, I think, with Scotty Garland.
Well, man, I'm excited to hear that you were back. And of course, I think we'll hear your voice on Rampage this Friday night. So be sure to check that out. But what's the next goal? We had talked before, maybe, hopefully, possibly the pay-per-view. Well, you exceeded expectations. You beat that back. Do you think you'll be at the pay-per-view next weekend?
I think it's doubtful, but I don't know. That's entirely up to Tony Khan. It may be all up to Tony Schiavone. No, I'm kidding. That's Tony's call. We haven't discussed it. And going to Long Island in December, when I haven't had a trip that long in a while, it's not something I would relish.
Okay. That makes sense.
However, if called upon, I will come play.
Of course.
And I'll play well as best I can anyway. So, I don't know. I'm not being evasive. I like to say, yeah, I'm going to be there, buy the pay-per-view, enjoy it. But I don't know. You still should buy the pay-per-view.
Yes.
Baby needs new shoes, as they say in gambling. Baby needs new shoes.
Well, our discussion today on the podcast, and we hope you guys are enjoying our holiday season. And I guess this is our last episode before Christmas. So we hope you guys have a Merry Christmas, and we'll be back in time to wish you a Happy New Year. But we're going to talk about a brand new day in professional wrestling. Once upon a time, we used to do a lot of polls here on the program, and we went back to that. And believe it or not, what won the poll is talking about this acquisition. We had another episode on deck of you talking some Mid-South or Junkyard Dog as a potential topic, or doing an old school Mid-South watch along, or talking about the acquisition that Jim Crockett Promotions made of the UWF. So that's our topic today. Bill Watt's book has gone into great detail about how Mid-South wrestling sort of got off track. And I guess at one point, Bill discussed with Ted Turner about the possibility of buying Mid-South wrestling. Do you remember hearing about that?
Way back in the day, they had some discussions, but they weren't like big high-level meetings. Look, Bill and Ted were a lot alike. They liked each other. They're both kind of mavericks, men's men, ladies' men, blah, blah, blah. And so the macho in them both came out when they were together, and they seemed to have great chemistry. With all that said, it was just another option to gain financial stability for Cowboy if he could have partnered, keyword, up with Ted. It just didn't come about. Now, Ted liked Bill enough to put Mid-South Wrestling on TBS for a short time, and it did great numbers. It was a top-rated wrestling show on TBS.
Yeah, let's talk about that for a minute, because once upon a time, we all know that Vince is actually going to buy the Georgia territory so he can get that TBS space, but Ole's going to continue to run a show there. So at one point in 1985, there's actually 3 different wrestling shows airing on Ted Turner's TBS: Championship Wrestling from Georgia, Vince McMahon's WWF, and Bill Watts' UWF. And you just mentioned, of all those, Bill's outfit oftentimes got the best ratings.
Yeah. Well, it was produced episodically. You know, when you're running a television show primarily as an infomercial to promote your local live events, just by nature, the shows are produced episodically. You go back and pick up what happened last week. That was a big piece of business. Bring it forward, that type stuff. So things keep getting connected, and it's very compatible and very friendly to a TV viewer. It's like watching your favorite soap opera. And Cowboy made sure that he wrote that show, he and Ernie, to where there were cliffhangers and surprises, and they wrote it like a television producer should. And so it worked out well in that regard. But the show did really good on TBS. We thought we did so good, we thought, well, this is going to be a layup. We're going to finally find our spot on TBS. But politics and money nixed it.
Let's talk about the money, because that's something we haven't spent a lot of time on. You know, there's been a lot of people writing and discussing over the years the Crockett's decision to buy not one, but two planes over the years. But with Mid-South taping in Atlanta, Watts actually buys a $750,000 plane to fly back and forth. I realize, you know, he's battling a behemoth here in Vince McMahon and his quest to take over the country with the WWF and in the territory system. But man, if we're talking about business maybe taking a dip, and it's a high stakes game of cards here, a $750,000 gamble on a plane in 1985, that's a big one, is it not?
Yeah. Are you talking about Cowboy, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. He had that plane before the Crockett talk ever started. Only because it got him around in the territory. It was a smaller plane. I think it seated maybe 4 passengers and a pilot and a co-pilot type thing. I don't think it had a bathroom, but it might have. I don't remember. I would have remembered that probably, especially now at my age. I got to pee every 10 minutes. Yeah, that was he already had that plane, and you know when we were trying to expand our syndication, so we're making sales calls like in Little Rock, so you could fly from Oklahoma to Little Rock in 30 minutes, or you could drive it in 4 hours.
Right.
So that was the basis behind the plane. And Bill had his pilot's license, commercial pilot's license. He was a good pilot. So he didn't have to hire a pilot. More often than not, when we go on these sales calls, I sat in the co-pilot's chair like a big shot. I wrote shotgun. But you always wonder, the morbid thoughts, well, what if he keels over? What if he has a seizure or some shit?
Oh, wow.
And I'm sitting there I was thinking all these movies on TV, these scenes on movies and TV I was seeing about people trying to emergency land a plane.
Yeah.
All that going through my mind. So anyway, but that was the deal on the plane.
Hey, so let me ask you, I didn't know that you had ridden co-pilot when Bill was flying.
Yeah.
But you've been in a plane that was piloted by Bill Watts, and you've been in a car that was piloted by Vince McMahon. What was scarier?
Well, Vince has got great depth perception. He'll tell you that. But when he was driving about 80 or 90 in Ohio, I think it was, and he was working the cones, road construction cones on the road every little bit, he was weaving in and out of those at a high rate of speed. And I was a little puckered at that point, I'll have to admit. The thing about, Bill was so attentive to his details as far as this piloting. He was highly trained. He had, great credentials, seriously, believe it or not. And a lot of people didn't know his expertise in flying. He got that bug from Eddie Graham, because Eddie used to fly his own plane. Many of us know. And it just allowed Bill, he's the top baby face. Well, let's back up. He's the owner. You got to pay all the bills. He's the top baby face. in addition to being the booker, his plate was pretty full.
Yeah, no doubt.
So it saved time. It was a convenience thing. And I think Eddie used to take, they used to go to the towns in the plane, run down to Miami or wherever it may be, up to Jacksonville. So the plane became a kind of a necessary evil, or access to a plane in the territory era if your territory was growing. Because all those years, Mid-South was a car territory.
Right.
Every booking was made by land. And as you continue to grow, those trips get longer. And to maximize your income, you're running shows every day, 7 days a week. The store never closes except for the holidays. So the plane became a expensive but necessary evil.
Let's talk about something else that
I took that plane to Atlanta, Connor, and that's where we did the deal with Jimmy and Rob Garner.
Okay, well, okay. Well, let's talk about another deal that was supposedly discussed. As the legend goes, Bill Watts and Ted Turner had a handshake deal that Bill was going to step up when the Vince McMahon deal expires. But instead, Jim Crockett winds up buying the time slot from Vince for $1 million. And I guess, according to Mr. Watts, Turner backs out of whatever deal that he had. Do you remember there being a handshake deal about Bill taking over?
I just know they came to, I don't know about the handshake and all the formality of that, or this double secret handshake or whatever. But I remember Bill thought they had a deal. He thought they had a deal, and he was very confident at that time that we were going to land on TBS sooner than later.
Well, the opportunity to be on TBS, I don't think can be overstated. This is before everybody had cable, but most folks had an opportunity to have cable or to pick up this superstation in addition to their local channels. So this is pre-Fox, but you'd have an ABC, a CBS, and an NBC affiliate. And then every now and again, man, you could pick up something special like the superstation.
Yeah, so basic cable it was one of the first shows, weekly shows, to find a home on basic cable, Connie.
Yes.
So if you had cable in your apartment, you've probably had TBS as one of your stations, without a doubt, because that was the whole secret of the growth of the Braves.
Yes.
The Braves got so popular because they became familiar. We got to know who the players were. We had heard the same voices in the announce booth. Skip Carey, Pete Van Waren, all those guys that people grew up with. So, they built a franchise, and they made stars on with the Braves. So he had those damn John Wayne movies. And what library did he buy? He bought that big library, MGM or something. Do you remember that?
Yeah, I think it's MGM. I think you're right.
All those movies, it was kind of cool. So I know he got some heat for colorizing some of those classics. Who cares?
Let's talk a little bit about, this battle with Vince. That's really what it is. I mean, the Crockett's are trying to expand nationally. That's the reason they're going to be trying to get this TBS spot. We know that Bill Watts has had his program on that show before. We know that Georgia Championship Wrestling had been on that show before, but a lot of people are assuming, hey, some of these other territories, the business is drying up. Vince has taken over. Perhaps the only option is to go national in order to compete with Vince, or risk your territory winding up like all the others. And it feels like that really becomes Bill Watts, Jim Crockett, and Vince McMahon. It's sort of a three-way dance. Like, none of the other territories were trying to compete with Vince. Is that fair to say?
Yeah. It's the big three there.
Yeah.
There are other guys that we left that were players.
Sure.
But not to the level of those three guys. McMahon, then Crockett, then Cowboy. And it was thought in our circles that expanding was the only way we were going to survive. That sounds maybe not a good business acumen, but that was what our thoughts were. We have to grow or we're going to die. And I think in general in business, it's that way. In any business, you really got to grow or you're on your way to dying. Growth is imperative. So, that was the big three there. And it was that way for a while. But that three-way dance, shall we say, didn't last long.
Well, we should mention that, TBS is obviously the biggest part of that national battle. So Bill's trying to get ready for that. And at the same time, trying to adjust once he realizes he doesn't have it. Some of those adjustments include a transition from Boyd Pierce to you. And Bill Watts would write that he was too Southern to make the push.
You talking about Boyd or me?
I thought he was saying that about you.
No.
I mean, about Boyd, and that's the reason he replaced you with Boyd. Is that not the case?
Yeah, that is true.
Yeah.
That is true, Connie.
We haven't spent a lot of time talking about Boyd Pierce here on the program, but obviously he's sort of your predecessor here. Can you educate some of our younger listeners about who Boyd Pierce was to you?
Well, he would have been a great character on Hee Haw. He was funny. He did impressions. He used to impersonate a humping bulldog, a male bulldog. He did it all the time in the locker room. It's funnier than shit. But Boyd was a salesman, traveling salesman, and he sold premiums and gimmicks, ink pens and notepads and all kinds of stuff like that. And he had a route, or he had his people that he saw at these little stores. So that's what Boyd did, and he was a hell of a salesman. But he was funny, and Boyd. The great thing about Boyd was Boyd knew his limitations, and maybe more importantly, he understood what his role was. His role was basically, "Hi everybody, I'm Boyd Pierce alongside Bill Watts, and this is Mid-South Wrestling," or something like that, and say, "And here's Bill." Then the next time you'd hear Boyd at any length was when he would say, "Thanks for being with us. We'll see you next week on another exciting episode of Mid-South Wrestling." So he basically was Bill's guy. When Bill needed a breath, Boyd said something. But I thought he was a better ring announcer than a commentator. Not that he was a bad commentator, but his voice was distinctive. It cut through the clutter, broadcasting and in ring announcing. So, but a swell guy, a wonderful guy. And, he had been in that chair a long time, never held any animosity toward me. Was never rude.
Wow.
Was never unfriendly, nothing. He just was always a sweetheart of a guy. From Burleson, Texas, Boyd Pierce.
Yeah,
Good man.
That wasn't even your experience in the WWF, so I'm glad to hear that, there was no resentment and he handled you well.
Yeah.
Let's talk about some other changes. Not only is he changing, he being Watts, pronoun boy, from Boyd Pierce to you, he's also moving out of the boys club there in Shreveport for TV into arenas. I guess the idea is we want this entire thing to feel bigger. We don't want to just feel regional or local. So let's do TV in an arena. What'd you think? Obviously you're in favor of being on the show and taking Boyd's spot. What'd you think of the decision to get out of the boys club and into the arenas for TV?
Well, it gave us a better look. It gave us a big time look, a major league look. If it was shot correctly, 3,000 or 4,000 people can look like 10. So it's just a matter of camera placement and how the show is shot. I liked it because the venue that we landed on was Tulsa. That's where I lived. So, the schedule was, I was talking to some guys last night in Oklahoma City. The old schedule was every other Sunday afternoon at 2:00, we'd have a show, a live event, house show in OKC. And then when the guys would finish their matches, as they finished and they got their rides together, they would drive over to Tulsa. And 75 mile an hour speed limits, just under 100 miles. So you can imagine it didn't take long. And guys would drive to Tulsa from Oklahoma City. And then that night, on Sunday night, starting at 7 o'clock, we would do 2 1-hour UWF shows. And nothing really changed to how we did the 1-hour shows, but just the name changed. So it was pretty cool, to be honest with you. I was home. And I had so many media contacts, just friendships and promotions and spending little advertising dollars with them, things of that nature, that I got a lot of media stretch. So every other Sunday night became an event, a regular event that you could schedule. You could bring your family to, whatever. So it was it worked out. That part worked out well for me.
Bill Watts would write this: Jim Ross was not only an excellent announcer, but he also became my right-hand man. So we replaced Boyd with Jim, which hurt Boyd's feelings, but that was the way things were as we tried to keep pace and survive. I haven't been around as many people as brilliant as Jim, and he was the kind of guy who, even when he was mad at you and would cuss you in private, would always give you his all and remain loyal. Jim had a tremendous impact on my life. Man, when you read something like that from a guy who was your mentor, that's got to make you feel good, no?
Pretty humbling.
Yeah.
Pretty humbling. Yeah. He always had a way with words, that slick talking rascal. Hey, look, I got a PhD in pro wrestling from Cowboy Bill Watts. And aside from his personality quirks, that some people like to point out, Michael Hayes will still talk about the bad payoff he got in the Superdome, things like that. But at the end of the day, all those guys that sat under the Watts learning tree and were booked and managed by the Cowboy were better off for it. Because a lot of them, if you go back and look at that territory that Crockett was buying, a lot of those guys ended up as major stars in the world of wrestling. And many of them at WWF at the time.
Let's talk a little bit about what else is changing. Boyd's out of the seat. You're in it. We're no longer doing TV at the boys club. We're doing it in the arena. And we're also going to rebrand. Instead of calling ourselves Mid-South, we're going to call ourselves the UWF, the Universal Wrestling Federation. Is this a Watts idea?
Yeah. And in the beginning, we had a logo that said, Bill Watts Presents on the graphic. I don't know if there's any of those still around, but that was kind of how the syndicators and the guys that we were using pitched Cowboy. And of course, I told Bill years after that, I said, it's just like putting your name on the show that you created. Hello, was like back in the day, Conrad. When independent television stations on local stations came to be, one of the easiest sales close the deal was to get the advertiser to agree to be in his own spots or her spots and to see themselves on television. And this advertising mode was a layup. People love to see themselves on television, to do their shitty, lame car commercials or whatever. So it was as a layup. So I told Bill that story. So there's a little something to that probably. But it was a cool looking logo, but it said Bill Watts Presents.
Yes.
Then that logo you had. So anyway, there you go. That's it. That's the shirt. That's the logo. So it's not a bad idea.
If you haven't already, be sure to check us out on YouTube so you can take a look at this. It's Grilling JR on youtube.com. So listen, we've got a lot of this in place. We got a new look for TV because we're in the arenas. We got a new sound for TV because you're taking over for Boyd. We've got a whole new logo. I mean, the whole presentation is changing here. And of course, it would have been nice had we had TBS, but now when we realize, okay, we don't have that, the Crockett's wound up getting it. We got to figure out, how do we compete nationally? So establishing national syndication for the company is going to be something that becomes a priority not only for Bill, but for you as well. You mentioned about trying to make all these different sales. Of course, that's what you were talking about. 70% of the United States would wind up having the syndicated show in their market. I'm not
That's
talking
pretty good
about
growth. That's good growth, Conrad. It was too much too soon, and we were understaffed. There was me and the outside company, 2 or 3 guys who helped us. It was perhaps it was the right undertaking. I'm not saying it was, but we weren't manned for the war. We didn't have enough soldiers, and when we didn't get TBS, it kind of blew everything up. To be honest with you, because to get a syndication deal, you have to understand you're probably going to be a year in building that time slot before you venture in to run live events to monetize your investment.
I see.
So the audience has got to find you. That's why things get so kabuki-ish when your show says, well, it's going to be on Friday night instead of Saturday night type deal. People can't find it. They're habitual viewers. They got a routine. So, but in syndication, it takes a while. Some of those markets that we had in the original Mid-South, when I got there, it was like 9 or 11 stations, have been carrying Mid-South wrestling for forever. It was a staple. And oftentimes when I got there, I moved it around to where, and it was such convincing to Cowboy because of the same thing. The audience can't find you. We started coming on in Central Time Zone at 10:30 on Saturday nights. So the news was our lead-in. The Saturday night news was our lead-in. The highest rated show of the night was the news, and we got that audience to come watch wrestling. So it worked out pretty good. The other time that I exploited a lot, I use the word exploited probably unjustly, was Sunday mornings. So you had the church crowd and you had the pre-church crowd and you had the non-church goers. So, 10 o'clock on Sunday morning, pretty good time.
What were these syndication deals looking like that you're getting here? Like when you're putting together a new market in a new town, like how would the deal structure be as best you can recall?
Well, they all wanted compensation, but because our ratings were so strong, our resume was powerful. When you're in a affiliate, ABC, NBC, CBS, whatever it may be, affiliate, and you're doing double-digit ratings, not just shares, but ratings, 10s, 14s, 15s. We had some markets that were doing like 16, 18 share rating. Is scary. So those numbers attracted a lot of newer stations that either had just come on the air or they're building their audience or they had a real weak time slot and they would take one of these suggestions on Saturday night or Sunday morning, etc. The key thing was to lock in the time frame. That was more important than just the time frame. It was had consistency.
Yes.
It's got to be there every single week. So, worked out pretty good for a while, but it's just you get the deal done. You got to bring some cash, and the way we did that was I would agree to an advertising contract, just like a retailer, and so you'd have it that's what you negotiated a number, and start from there. So every time you would run the event, a live event in that market, you agreed to pay X dollars in advertising spots outside your show on that station so they could create some revenue.
Okay. So you weren't actually paying to be on necessarily. Like
No.
You weren't paying to have them play your tapes. You're simply promising that, hey, I'm going to give you this tape that's going to get you some good ratings that you can go monetize and sell. And in exchange for being on your air, when I come to the market, I will spend money promoting on your station.
Correct.
Wow. I had no idea that's the way it worked. I just learned something new today. Thank you for that.
You think I'm an idiot?
I mean,
I thought it was a good deal.
It's a great deal.
And the stations, by and large, liked it.
Yeah.
They weren't out any money.
Right.
They got a proven commodity that had drawn ratings in other parts of the country. And so it made sense. It was a win-win. And in business, that's always the best.
Yes.
You got a win-win. Everybody's got to feel good about the deal. And so that's what, but again, you're a year away from maturation.
Yes.
You're a year away before the audience has found you. You've got a couple of rating books. You can judge how your audience, how big it's grown or not, where your strongest demos are, so you know how to advertise. If I had real strong 18 to 34 men numbers, I would advertise on country radio and rock, because it covered most of the males as far as music's concerned. So it was an interesting job. I learned a lot on that job, and thought, well, you know, again, we're outmanned, Conrad, outmanned, and just didn't have the staff to pull it all through. And those were some great days, though. I learned to be a better businessman and learned to be, you know, believe in growth. If you don't grow, you die.
In this era, I mean, I know that once upon a time, all we did was sell tickets. I mean, television was an infomercial for live events. I get that.
Yeah.
But with all the new changes and trying to compete nationally, did Bill have a strategy for merch? I mean, I know that, you know, guys have had quote unquote gimmick tables forever, but I'm saying like running promos on these syndicated tapes so you could buy shirts or hats.
I think we did that for a while, Connie.
Okay.
I think we did that, but it wasn't very organized. It was a small mall and paw type operation run out of the basement of Watts' office in Bixby.
I see.
So to answer your question, no, not a lot of thought was given, but obviously that would be coming.
Yes.
It wasn't like it's a secret. It's a secret sauce. Man, by the way, we sold a lot of sauce this holiday season. Golly.
I'm glad to hear it.
Appreciate everybody's business. It's good. And you know, that damn mustard, it's become number one.
Really?
Yeah.
Well, that's awesome.
Well, you know, me talking about my diabetes.
Yeah.
And how my blood sugar vacillates at its highest at 300. Last week, a couple of days last week, it was 100. And so I take my blood sugar levels every day. I take an insulin shot in my gut every day, every night, and it's all working. I'm feeling better. I'm getting stronger. The next thing we're going to do is they're going to put a port in my arm, and they're going to set me up so I can give myself intravenous antibiotics.
Wow.
Yeah, and they think that's going to knock out this stuff
for your leg. Yeah,
on my leg. So hopefully, we'll see. Another procedure, but hey, I'm willing to try. I've been dealing with this thing for over a year. I'm tired of it. It hurts. It stings. It throbs. You just got to be dressed every day. It's just a pain in the ass, Connie. But it has healed to some degree, but it's not going to go away until some kind of heavy duty intravenous antibiotic smacks the shit out of it.
What's the date on that port? Do you know when you're getting that done?
Early January.
Oh, wow. So soon.
Yeah. I want it sooner than later. Fine with me. Do it tomorrow if we wanted to. But yeah, you want to get those things started. If they are that confident that those intravenous antibiotics are going to do the trick, the sooner we start, the better, in my opinion.
Hey, speaking of the Sooners are going to be playing the Wildcats on Thursday, December 28th. That's your big bowl game. So as folks are listening to this next Thursday. So when you listen to Grilling JR next week, that night, be sure to watch Oklahoma and Arizona.
I don't know what to think about those guys. Arizona's won 9 games. They're 9-3, I believe. Don't quote me on it, but I think so. And I believe that 2 of their 3 losses came in overtime. So they were very close to having one hell of a season, and they had a good season. But they've been kind of rebuilt out there, but that's a traditional. Back in the day, was a traditional football powerhouse, Arizona. So I think that's where Teddy Bruschi, the ESPN guy, played, All-American linebacker.
Overtime losses to Mississippi State and USC, and then they lost to Washington by 1 score. Washington wound up being number 2. So this is going to be a big game, and I'm sure you're going to have all your Oklahoma swag and gear like you like it. And we're excited to announce a new affiliate partnership with Fanatics, easy for me to say, the world's largest collection of officially licensed fan gear. It's an easy way to support your favorite podcasts. Shop for your favorite players and teams by going to shopsportsmerch.com. That's shopsportsmerch.com. Or if you're watching along with us on YouTube, just hit that QR code that's up on your screen right now, or just check out the description below for the link. We'll also have it up on all of our socials. You can shop with confidence for your favorite jerseys, caps, shirts, jackets, hoodies, and more with Fanatics. But be sure to use our special link, shopsportsmerch.com, and that will support our show.
It's not a missing link, ladies and gentlemen. The link exists. I like to go on there and just look.
Yeah.
They always got new stuff. And you find some shirt that you really like, or a sweater, hoodie, whatever. I lost a bunch of weight. I don't know if you could tell that on television.
Absolutely.
And my agent, our friend Barry Bloom, texted me that how good I looked, and how good I sounded. Full of shit here, big balls. And he said, "Well, your coat was too big." All that stuff was here in Oklahoma in my closet. I had probably worn it in 2 years,
right?
Maybe a year. Sport coats, suits. I just stopped wearing them. And I picked one out, and I thought, God dang, I lost a bunch of weight because this thing's too big. I felt like I was wearing Andre's coat.
Well, good for you.
Shivani does that. Shivani's the last guy in line that will alter the length of his sleeves.
Yeah, he ain't gonna do that. Him or Michael Hayes.
God almighty, that would drive me crazy. Always pulling them up or moving around. I love Tony though. Tony works hard, boy. You talked about the MVP list. He has to deal with those talents, getting to do those interviews. And that's like, I don't understand that. I don't understand how a producer has got to essentially convince the talent, we got to go record this interview. They knew now earlier in the day, they had an interview to do and what the topic was and subject matter, et cetera, et cetera. But there's always something, 1 or 2 little things they got to do. I'll be right there. Just 1 second. So he does all that. So he's like a kindergarten cop.
Well, let's go back on track here. Talk about the good old days here. Bill's trying to expand to go national. We mentioned that through your syndicated program efforts, you get 70% of the United States an opportunity to see this show. Mm-hmm. Are you guys trying to play follow the leader maybe with Vince, see what he's doing? And let him be proof of concept. Then we'll
Conrad, we're just trying to build a network to promote live events. That's all. I don't think we're following Vince. Would have been like following the Dumont Network or some of these other early syndicators and stations or groups that had multiple television shows. I had a television show in multiple markets. Obviously, you look at the leader of the market in any business. And what are they doing right? What mistakes have they made that we don't want to replicate? But primarily, what have they done right to put them in this position? What are the elements that they have in place to make this machine work? So as far as that's concerned, we obviously paid attention to what Vince was doing.
We should mention that the UWF debut, the launch, if you will, takes place, ironically enough, when you're working with Jim Crockett Promotions for the Jim Crockett Senior Memorial Cup at the Superdome. How did Crockett and Watts seem to get along?
I thought they got along pretty good. You know, caution. They approached each other, I think, maybe with some degree of caution. You know, they both knew what they were dealing with. They're dealing with wrestling promoters. And unfortunately, their predecessors haven't been so kind to that profession. They got bad reps, some of them. Everybody's looking for a job, for some con job, or how can I make more money, or how can we do this, or whatever. So they approached each other cautiously, but professionally. I thought they got along pretty good, actually. They'd laugh, have a drink, eat a steak. They were basically on the same page because Jimmy let Dusty do all the booking for that show. That was Dusty's gig. So Cowboy helped create the American Dream in Florida, working as a booker for Eddie Graham. So he and Dusty got along well and had a long-standing, respectful relationship. Now, they didn't always get along or always agree, but they had fun working together. They fed off each other. And that Oklahoma-Texas rivalry was prominent, believe it or not, in their just kibitzing, their dialogue. They had fun with each other.
Let's talk about what happened here. April 19th, 1986. We've got two shows in the same day. The matinee show in the Superdome does 3,500 fans. This is part of the Memorial Cup. That evening, 13,000 fans are there. That sounds like a hell of a house, and it is. But just 3 years prior, you guys were running a Superdome show here with Junkyard Dog and Mr. Olympia on top in a steel cage, and you're drawing 21,000 people. Is that just a sign of the times for the territory, do you think?
It might be because JYD was over more than the tournament. He was hot, and that was a hot-ass angle. And Jerry Stubbs, right? Isn't he the masked man? I believe it is. Hell of a hand. Underrated. Doesn't get the credit that he deserves. One of those Southern-schooled pro wrestlers that knew everything and could work with anybody. He was great with pace. He let things process. So in other words, he told his joke and he allowed the audience to laugh. So I think that might be something about giving Dog some credit. And Ernie and Bill had Dog ready. They had him hot. People were dying to see this match. As you know, that was a big house for us. But there's been others there that were similar, but that was a big house, no doubt. I helped promote that tournament. I brought in Dusty and Baby Doll, and we had radio in studio. And you've done a lot of media, obviously. To get in studio at multiple stations in the same day is not easy.
No.
You got to block your time. You got to, all this other shit. So we hit the market hard. I worked out a deal with the chicken place, Louisiana chicken, Popeyes.
Popeyes, yeah.
Yeah, I should know that by heart. It's probably running in my veins. But I did a deal with Popeyes where we had a coupon that was forced distributed. In other words, it went to every bag of Popeyes that went out the door in all that region. And the coupon was a dandy now. Upper level seats, $5. $5 with coupon. So, we promoted the hell out of it. A lot of the matches are cold. And I think the guys are probably thinking the concept, the wide variety of stars, this huge inventory of talent will be enough. But it wasn't. that territory was used to having personal issues settled at big shows. And the cup wasn't over. Rivalries and blood and guts were over. So the show was a different presentation than that Mid-South audience was used to seeing.
Let's talk a little bit about maybe when Bill realized there was a problem in New Orleans, the home of the Superdome. He's going to run here again in June. So this is April of 86, but when he's back in June, he wrote of this in his book. One of our advanced publicity guys liked to call escort services when we were in town. He called me before the summer show and said, I've called every escort service in the book and they're all closed. These escort services had page after page of huge ads in the yellow pages in the New Orleans phone book, ads that cost a lot of money, and every one of them had gone out of business. On the face of it, you might not see the significance and might be wondering, what the hell does that have to do with wrestling in the Superdome? But he's trying to make a point that the oil recession is really devastating the local economy and all of the, extra income, the disposable income.
That's a key word right there. The disposable income, it got dry at some of those oil wells. You had a region of the United States that was so strongly dependent on oil and gas, and that bottom just went crazy, gone, boom. Millionaires became broke overnight. And so the irony was our television ratings increased during this time. And of course you figured out, well, it costs you nothing to sit home and watch television.
That's right.
And that's what they were doing. But the ratings were scary good. If you're a booker or a promoter or whatever, a cowboy, you'd salivate because of this audience that you have in these markets. But the audience was there. I'm sure they wanted to come. And even though we had very moderate ticket prices, always a low end ticket to get you in. But shoot, man, no money. And we're shooting some good angles. Like I said, it must have been pretty good, Connie, because the ratings are up.
11,000 people here are at the June show, draw 70,000 folks here. There's a lot of talent for some of these big shows. Guys like Ric Flair are going to be on this program, including that story we've all heard from Terry Taylor about his match in the Superdome with Ric Flair. It's the June show here. November of 86, we would see an increase in the Superdome. We're up to 13,000 fans, $78,000 gate. That's probably the last time we saw that kind of crowd at the Superdome. When you think about November of 86, 13,000 fans, is that the last big crowd, you think, anywhere?
Oh, I'd have to go back and research it, but yeah, it sounds about right. Sounds about right, Connie.
By April of 87, you're doing the Superdome show and it's drawing 3,000 fans. Just 7 months prior to that, it was 13,000 fans.
Well,
I mean,
there you go. Do the math.
Yes.
Do the friggin' math, man. There was no money. There was no money. We were fighting and clawing, doing all we could, producing good television, doing crazy stuff, getting more violent, more aggressive. So maybe we got too violent. I don't know. I don't think so. I mean, we weren't ECW level violence as they were at times. So, but it was pretty graphic. Hey, when you book, I remember doing promos for the Loop, and I for some reason it sticks in my mind because we went to Albuquerque, and we'd never run Albuquerque before, but our TV was on there. It was on a good station. We could measure the audience because we got the rating books, etc. The Arbitrons, and it was a metered like it's stuff now where you get it in an hour or immediately. And I remember the main event, Conrad, and this might be an indication we could have gone a little too hardcore. We had a 20-man first blood battle royal. So the way you're eliminated is that you bleed. So you got 29 guys gigging and the winner. Maybe that was a little too graphic.
Maybe so.
And that was booked not just at a special show, one off deal. It was booked around the loop. So that was just a different philosophy than I would have had. But nonetheless, be a good soldier, do your job. Don't be a piece of shit.
Well, the business is a piece of shit at this point. You mentioned how strong the ratings are. We've also talked about how bad the ticket sales are down. And it's all because Oklahoma, Louisiana, Arkansas, Mississippi, and Texas, they're all killed by this oil industry. So the timing for Bill trying to go national literally could not have been worse. Home base
could not have been worse, Conrad. You're exactly right. Good point. Couldn't have been worse. And we didn't know. Goddamn, you should like to have a crystal ball there. I mean, we put hours and hours of work in this thing. I mean, it wasn't like we had this huge staff. It wasn't, all these people. I noticed there's AEW just got a lot of folks that I haven't even met because they're hiring people and people are coming in and doing things on an administrative level. Which you got to, but we had nobody. We had one secretary. She handled payroll and all kinds of answered the phone, set up Bill's meetings, handled all the taxes. I mean, we were bare bones, man. So, I was writing radio ads. I was booking the time. I was promoting some towns. Like I said, Tulsa was my primary priority because that was the TV town. So, yeah, man, it was interesting times, to say the very least. But a great learning experience. Heartbreak, yes, but a learning experience that I wouldn't trade. Absolutely.
Watts would write this. It was a devastating ripple effect, and it kept coming in waves, getting worse every time. By the end of '86, we'd gone from averaging a gross of $100,000 per show in Oklahoma City and $60,000 a show in Tulsa the same day to $14,000 in Oklahoma City and $26,000 in Tulsa. We could barely afford to keep the doors open for those shows. Banks were going broke, real estate crashed, and even airlines went broke. It was a disaster. Hotels were going broke and being repossessed. The oil crunch took people out of business they'd been in all their lives. People lost everything. The timing here, man, it's just heartbreaking.
Yeah. Yeah. It's like being in business during the Great Depression.
Yeah.
These immigrants move over, they work their ass off, they save every nickel and dime they can. They start a business, and all of a sudden, bam, here comes a depression, and they got nothing again. So it was literally that way. I remember guys buying homes there, not a bunch of homes, but you could buy a house. I bought a house in Texas for little or nothing. Nice 3-bedroom house with a pool by myself. The office is going to be in Dallas for a while there. And like I said, for little or nothing. It was hard to believe I thought it was a misprint in the real estate ad. But that's people just trying to get something, some capital, some new money, even if they lost on the original purchase.
Watts would also lay some of the blame on the downturn in business here on Ken Mantell. But in hindsight, the economy is going to trump all, is it not?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. Kenny probably hit the wall booking. Kenny was like a lot of the boys, the wrestlers. Sometimes they put off until the last minute. And we all have those traits, I think. I do. I'll have something I need to do, and I'll do that in a minute. I'll do it later. I'll do it tomorrow, whatever. And that's not a good trait. But in any event about that, Kenny was a smart worker, junior heavyweight champion, NWA junior heavyweight champion, originally from Utah, and he based out of the Dallas area. He was a booker for the Von Erichs when, the Von Erich boys and the Freebirds were hot. He was the booker. at least one of the bookers. Now, I'm pretty sure I'm accurate on that deal. Like all bookers, he had an expiration date, like they all do, and he had to move on. And so Cowboy and Kenny were buddies from Cowboy. Kenny worked for Cowboy as a wrestler. And I remember doing one of the first big high profile matches I did was a Texas death match between Mantell and Terry Funk. And it was a bounty thing. So, Mantell survived all these bounty attacks for several weeks, somehow or another overcoming in these battles. And all of a sudden, the end is, I can't remember who it was, maybe Buck Robley had the bounty on him. Who was the booker? I think maybe that thing was hot as hell, and they brought in Terry Funk. That's the first time I ever refereed a match with Terry Funk. I saw true artistry before my very eyes. Psychologically, facial expressions, body English. That's before he was doing Hurricane Rondas and stuff when he's middle-aged and crazy. One of the greatest psychologists I've ever seen. And when you're in the ring and you can see their eyes or you can hear what they're saying when they do say something, it's an astonishing way to get an education. And I'll always be eternally grateful for that. It's made me a better announcer, if I can be so egocentric to say that, because I feel it. I refereed for a long time. That's how I fed my family. Didn't feed them much, but I did it.
We should mention that there were some bilateral contracts with the top guys, as I understand it, meaning some of these guys are going to get paid regardless of how the business is doing. That's not the way the business normally worked, but by the mid 80s, things were changing. Do you remember there being some contracts with some particular talent that was giving Cowboys some heartburn? Can you tell us about that?
I think that there's probably guys just wanting to upgrade. It was a sign of the times. If you're a smart businessman, at some point in time, it's going to come down to how do you manage your overhead? And if you can, these guaranteed dollars are what the talents and their wives are looking for. So you can see things changing. But, you want to protect your top guys. And so guys got, free birds and some of those cats got guaranteed deals, I believe. And so they knew what they're going to make every week. I've always advised the guys just when they're getting payoffs for the house shows, which is the only source of income to speak of. When your check comes, take all your money when it's there. If you're getting paid cash at the house show, which a lot of guys did, then, take your money. And so obtain and possess your cash if you can. So anyway, yeah, things kept changing, Conrad. I'm making my point here. It changed and changed, and it was a sign of the times, quite frankly. Contracts were becoming topics of conversation. Ball players' contracts become news stories. And these guys perceive themselves, and many rightfully so, that they deserved some guaranteed money, and which added some security to their household. And maybe I can live in this town and put my kid in school and stay for a while.
Watts would say in 1987, he was losing $50,000 a week. Does that sound like a realistic number to you?
Yeah.
Wow.
Sure does. Yeah, I was bleeding green. So yeah, it was hard. It took all of it. It was essentially eliminating his savings.
Yeah.
That he'd worked all his life to gain.
And in the middle of all this, as Vince is expanding nationally, just to be clear, we're not just battling for television stations and market share. We're battling to keep the roster together. We've already talked about Dog leaving and how devastating that was. But here, Jim Duggan's going to give notice that he too has seen the writing on the wall. He's read the tea leaves, and
Right.
he thinks it's best for his career, and who can blame him, to go to the WWF.
He was right.
Yeah.
He was right. And as I recall, he left the right way. We knew he was leaving. If I'm not mistaken, unless that's a story that Meltzer's covered, I'm not aware there was any issues whatsoever. Duggan's a man's a man. He kept his word. He fulfilled his commitments and he left. But he had done a great job while he was there. Number one guy. He replaced Dog.
I know that, we've talked a lot on this show over the years about how fans wanted new. I get that. And we also said that maybe there was a little bit of a finger to blame at Ken Mantell, but in reality, it's the economy that is dictating the fate here.
Absolutely, without question.
So said differently, I don't think there was a talent that he could have brought in. Like, yes, it sucks to see Duggan lose, but I don't know that he could have brought anyone in that would have magically changed the economic circumstance of the community. I mean, that's not possible to overcome, right?
Unless they were Secretary of the Treasury.
Right.
And they could do some financial adjustments. Of course not. There's no talent that you could brought. You could brought in Hogan during that time. You might get a little pop one, but people ain't got the money. Boy, I'd like to go see Hulk Hogan, but I got to buy school supplies. I got to go to the grocery store. God damn, you seen the price of groceries type deal. So no, it was fait accompli, Conrad. The hay was in the barn.
We should also talk about, the context of the reason I'm framing it this way. The economy's down. We've got some syndicated deals in place where we're required to spend some money to promote our upcoming show. And a year ago, when we put them in place, that made sense. But now the economy's just taking a nosedive to where we're not going to be able to run a profit after we pay the guys and we pay for the building and we pay for the advertising. So every time we go out, we're losing cash too. So it's not like, let's hire another booker, let's bring in another star. We're just losing cash. And so I'm wondering, as the walls are sort of closing in on Bill here, we know what wound up happening, but was it ever seriously discussed that he might just fold up shop completely, not do a sale, just close down completely?
No, not that I recall. We're not going down without a fight. That's him.
I like it.
Yeah, no.
Well,
I don't think he didn't it's one of those throw his hands up. Hey, we can't do it. We're done. I'm going to get out while I still got some cash left. And I can, still have a comfortable retirement type deal. Because 50 G's a week is impactful.
A lot of money. And let's appreciate too, 50 G's a week in 87. So we're talking about 35 years ago. 50,000 a week sucks now. Imagine how much worse it was back then.
Hell yes.
So Bill's going to set up some meetings with different investors who like the idea of purchasing the company in a stock deal. And one of the guys is a fellow named Daniel. And it doesn't sound like it's all on the up and up, because when Bill asked for a portion of the sale in cash instead of just stock, it all blows up. What do you remember of this arrangement that maybe he had once upon a time to sell it to somebody else? I mean, did you ever think that would work, or what do you recall of those dealings?
I thought it was mishandled. The guy was not a good guy. I'm surprised Bill went with it as long as he did. It was never going to happen. It's internet talk now, but that's all it was. It's just, he was looking for solutions to his problem.
Yes.
That was a potential solution. That's how I see it.
In your mind, was there ever a potential player that could have been a solution besides Vince McMahon or Jim Crockett?
Not that we didn't know him. We never met him. The genre of pro wrestling is strange, as we all know. We still overcome obstacles with the media. It's so much better than it's ever been. Thank goodness. But golly, the getting media back in the day and is a closed city. In other words, you didn't have a lot of allies, Conrad. Nobody at the newspaper is going to bail your ass out. Hey, we'll give you an ad, or we'll do a story. Let's do a big story. Let's do a 3-parter. You weren't getting those opportunities because wrestling was perceived to be, like a lot of things, on its downward trend, and it was. Fact's a fact.
Do you think the Watts pride is maybe the reason he didn't just try to do a deal straight with Vince or with Crockett right away?
I don't know what. I think he always thought there's a way out.
Mm.
Vince would have been the most logical guy to say, we'll say this TV network. That's all we're selling. And you get some talents along with it, which are good talents. So some of them are going to be WrestleMania type talents. Go ahead.
At this point, did you think Bill had a hard on for Vince?
Yeah.
He
didn't like him.
Yeah.
I think he respected him, but personally, socially, they were on opposite ends.
Yeah. Well, I tell you what, if you'd like to have a hard on for Vince McMahon or anybody else, Blue Chew can help. Lord knows that JR and I are big believers in Blue Chew, and we think you will be too. It's a unique online service that delivers the same active ingredients as Viagra, Cialis, and Levitra, but in chewable form and at a fraction of the cost. You can take them anytime, day or night, so you can plan ahead or be ready whenever an opportunity arises. And the process is simple. You sign up at BlueChew.com, you consult with one of their licensed medical providers, and once you're approved, you'll receive your prescription within days. And here's the best part. It's all done online. So no visits to the doctor's office, no awkward conversation, and no waiting in line at the pharmacy. Blue Chew's tablets are made in the USA, prepared and shipped directly to your door, all in a discreet package. Blue Chew wants to help you have better sex. So discover your options at BlueChew.com. Chew it and do it. And we've got a special deal for our listeners. Try Blue Chew free when you use our promo code JR at checkout. Just pay $5 shipping. That's BlueChew.com. The promo code is JR and you'll receive your first month free. Visit BlueChew.com for more details and important safety information. And we thank Blue Chew for sponsoring the podcast. And we also thank you for tuning in today. The best, cheapest, easiest way to support the show is to check us out on YouTube. If you haven't already, go ahead and hit the subscribe button and make sure you turn on the notifications bell, because JR and I are going to be going live in the new year, and it's going to be happening exclusively on YouTube. That's Grilling JR on YouTube.com. I also want to mention, if you're still looking for a last minute Christmas present, or maybe you've got to get together after Christmas, can I recommend that you go ahead and check out jrsbbq.com. You heard Jim talking earlier about how mustard is number one. Well, the sauce never goes out of fashion either. There's two different types of hot sauce, or two different types of barbecue sauce. You got a hot and a regular. You've also got JR's hot ass red sauce, or red ass hot sauce. I'll get it right. How about the all-purpose seasoning, the Chipotle
Conrad
ketchup?
is not a paid commercial spokesman.
Something for everybody, though, is it not, at jrsbbq.com?
Yeah. And, signed stuff, action figures, Topps trading cards, something that fits every budget and every occasion for the wrestling fan. It's probably one of the more unique gifts you're going to give. You got a buddy that is a fan. You guys talk wrestling and you watch this show maybe together. Nice gift, personalized. It's personal. It means more. So, and again, as I always say, costs nothing to look at jrsbarbecue.com. Our store never closes.
Watts tells a story that it was your idea to call up Vince McMahon and tell him, hey, I'm going to file federal antitrust suit against you, but if you buy the territory, I won't.
Wow.
Is that right? Do you remember positioning that way? I mean, do you remember pitching that to Bill?
Calling, talking to Vince?
Yeah.
No.
Okay.
I don't remember that at all. I remember look, you remember talking to Vince. I remember virtually every conversation I ever had with him.
No. I think Watts is saying you told Watts that it was your idea.
Oh, okay.
To make the pitch.
That, we made it. Conrad, as I said earlier, we were looking for solutions.
Yes.
We were looking for answers, for God's sakes. That was a far-fetched idea, without question. But, I'm sure it came, now that you mention it, I'm sure it came up in a conversation. But I don't think we had the money
to do a federal lawsuit.
To fund a lawsuit.
Yeah. Well, what's interesting here is
Not that it would have won anyway.
right.
I think it had been thrown out or laughed at.
As the story goes, like a year prior to this, Vince actually did meet with Bill to try to buy out his territory like he did with a lot of other promoters. Do you remember hearing about that meeting?
Yeah, of course.
Why was Watts not receptive? And do you think in hindsight he regretted not doing something by this point?
I don't remember what the deal was, but it was soft as far as Cowboy was concerned.
Right.
So, same old deal. Promoter wants to make more money.
Sure.
And Cowboy wanted more money than Vince is willing to offer. And so, consequently, and therefore, they couldn't come to terms. It would have been good for everybody if they could. To say it was a mistake, I can't. Because I don't know what was at stake. I don't know what the offer was. I don't remember. But it wasn't anything that blow your socks off.
It feels like it's positioned here where you're trying to create a bidding war of sorts. You know, again, the idea that Watts is crediting you with is you call and tell Vince, hey man, I'm going to file a federal antitrust lawsuit against you, or you can buy me out. And then immediately pick up the phone and call Crockett and say, hey, I'm getting ready to sell this thing to Vince. Just wanted to give you a heads up, thinking that perhaps Crockett will think, oh, this is my chance to be a player. And if Vince gets control of the Watts territory, maybe that kills my baby. And you actually wrote this in your book, Bill, I've got an idea. Cowboy was listening. He was burnt out and ready to hear other suggestions. Why don't you sell? I said. I would ask Crockett if he was interested in buying. I didn't know if Watts was going to hug me or kill me for even bringing the suggestion up. $2 million, he said. Excuse me? I mean, I heard him, but was taken by surprise by just how quickly and easily he said yes to selling his company. You get us $2 million and I'm out. So tell me about this meeting. I mean, what do you remember of this?
That was a pretty good description of it in that book. By the way, my new book is, you can get pre-orders now. We'll plug that. There it is. Thanks, Bull. Bull Ramus on the spot, baby. jrbook50.com pre-order. Appreciate it if you do. It gives us an indication of the interest level. I think you're really going to like it because it's, like I said, it's got many chapters, but they're all short. So they're short, hopefully entertaining reads. So, and I'll be doing the audio version after the first of the year at some point. So anyway, I don't know why I said that. I want to sell books. That's why. Where were we, Connie?
You mentioned the idea of selling to Crockett, and
Yeah.
Watts immediately says $2 million.
Yeah, it's right. I mean, boom, immediately. But we were in his office again, searching for solutions. You know, he needed cash. Cowboy is he, pronoun boy. And so I thought, well, here's an idea. And like I said, I wrote, you're either going to slap me or hug me.
Yeah.
Because it's probably one of the more viable ideas that we brainstormed about and come up with. Of all the things we've talked about, stock and this and events, whatever, this is probably the most likely thing that could happen, considering the lay of the land. And now Crockett has the opportunity to knock out one of his quote unquote competitors and strengthen his syndicated television aspect component and acquire some quality talent, main event talent. Not everybody, but Sting was in that group. You know, not bad. By the way, I hear the tickets for Greensboro for Sting's last match are down there. I don't want to say they're sold out, but it's threatening a sellout. And I'm sure by long before showtime, it'll be sold out. How wonderful would that be? How wonderful would that be to see the Greensboro Coliseum full again?
For Sting's last match. Yeah.
For Sting's last match.
Pretty amazing story.
Yeah, it's awesome. And, you know, my pipe dream selfishly would be that Shivani and I would call that match.
Absolutely. Me too.
Just like we did the original. So while we're both alive and able. So anyway, that's that.
At this point, when Cowboy hits you with the 2 million immediately, did you know in your heart, hey, he wants to be done with wrestling? I mean, did you think
that was a good price?
Yeah,
that really was for all you're getting. It was, and how you can monetize it going forward. It was a good price. I thought it was a negotiable price, one that's you're close to being able to close the deal. So I made sure he was sure about it, and you want to think about this? Because I said, I'm moving. I'm calling Crockett. And I think I reached out to Rob Garner, one of Crockett's right-hand businessmen. Nice guy.
Yeah, you wrote this in your book about that meeting. When I landed in Atlanta, Crockett and his right-hand man, Rob Garner, were waiting for me in a conference room at the terminal. There was no food ordered, no drinks had. It was just straight business. Neither Crockett nor Watts was setting the world on fire with their promotions, and I spent 20 minutes talking to Crockett and Garner about how both companies should come together if they wanted to continue to challenge Vince. In truth, I was trying to read the room and see just how big Crockett's appetite was for continuing to compete with McMahon. Because I said, as the meeting was coming to a close, if you weren't willing to team up, then Watts might think of selling. I could see on both men's faces that this news was of huge curiosity to them, not only because they might be interested in buying, but they knew that McMahon would be. Boy, this is chess right here. This ain't checkers. I like this, man.
Yeah, it was interesting times. They, it was easy sell. Jimmy, and supported by Rob, Jimmy saw growth. Jimmy saw what I saw, potential. If you play your cards right and get your infrastructure in order with all these new stations and all these opportunities to expose talents in new areas, like we talked about, people like new. So we're offering something that's fresh and new in some of these places. So I thought he had a great vision for what we were talking about doing. But, the key thing is there are two things about wrestling. The most important components of pro wrestling are talent and television. Television component we were putting together pretty good if he bought this network to add to what he already had. And it's Superstation. Pretty good, pretty attractive piece of business. And it lets you keep talent fresh. You don't have to have guys on TV every week, but there became the problem. When talents found out they weren't going to be on television, or they might not be on television, all hell broke loose. If a UWF wrestler accidentally backed into some promo time, the other guys got either double the time or significantly more. So, Dusty was under a lot of pressure from the boys who didn't want to lose their spot and felt pressure. I always thought that made everything better, competition, because some things you can't stop. You couldn't stop Sting's popularity growth, for example.
Well, let's talk about, the syndicated network. You've been growing that. Obviously, Crockett has too. Combining them is going to be of significant interest for Crockett. You wind up negotiating the deal with Crockett, and Watts would write that he wasn't smart enough in transactions to know to buy insurance for this deal. Meaning when Crockett goes broke and sells to Turner, he winds up not getting all of his money here. In hindsight, he wishes he would have thought of buying some sort of insurance policy against closing this sale. But
interesting.
How do you remember, the terms of this deal coming together? Is there a lot of back and forth? Are you speaking on behalf of Bill? Talk to us through the nitty gritty here.
No, I made my tag. I got my deal done. He wanted $2 million to sell the company. We accomplished that.
Yes.
As far as the intricacies of drawing up a contract, I never heard of insurance for a deal like that, which it makes sense. and I'm sure it's true, but it's foreign to me. So, but once the basic points were established, yes, it will be sold for $2 million. Once those things are established, I gracefully tagged out, because now you're getting into land of
Yes.
that I'm not familiar with. Hell, I'd give bad advice, or I just don't know. So I knew my role, as The Rock would say, and let Watts have and that's where I think that's where Jimmy and Bill then reconnected to work to finalize this whole thing, and I wasn't privy to those meetings by request. This was not my deal.
Part of the deal is that Crockett's going to take over ownership of the office in Dallas that Bill had been using. And a lot of people on the Crockett side.
Big mistake, Connie. Not to cut you off, but the whole thing, Cowboy, that was part of that UWF name change. You got to get more national. So Dallas was more recognized in that regard than Bixby, Oklahoma. So anyway, I'm sorry to interrupt your thought, but that building, that office space, was a bad omen, bad business, in my opinion.
We got to talk about this office because it's become such a big part of the story. Like, all the folks on the Crockett side would always point to this office, and people would talk about how crazy the expenses were on it. Is that fair? I mean, was it over the top for a wrestling organization?
Pretty opulent, because Cowboy envisioned having high-level meetings there with potential partners and sponsors and things like that. So he wanted to exude success. That's why a lot of the guys back in the old days, Conrad, here's an example. I was amazed when I first got in wrestling in 1974 by the amount of big cars parked near the arena, and a big Cadillac, big Oldsmobile, whatever. And of course, the reason for that was twofold. One, you're hauling around some big guys, oftentimes for long distances, but those big cars exuded success.
Yes.
I'm a star. I'm driving a Cadillac. You're driving that old truck. So that's kind of a crazy analogy, but if you think about it, it makes sense.
Bill Watts would write that Paul Bosch was pretty upset with Watts over this sale, and eventually had to pay Watts out for his percentage of Houston when Bosch sold to Vince. What was the relationship like between Paul Bosch and Bill Watts? And do you think it was fractured a little bit over the sale, or was it always kind of tenuous because we're promoters?
I think it was always kind of icy, trustworthy. You know, Paul was a very smart man, but he'd been in the business forever, had saw every con man, every promoter, et cetera, et cetera. And Bill saw Paul as a very wise, somewhat cagey guy. Paul was a brilliant promoter. He got over more than some of the talents in Houston because of all his charity work and his TV commercials and all. You know, he discovered Mattress Mac.
Yeah.
I've been in the studio when Mattress Mac was doing his commercials. Jim McElvey, he's a great guy. And rich. God, is he rich. All on selling furniture. So, but what a good dude. But Paul hooked up with him, IW Marks, I think it's called IW Marks Jewelers.
That's right.
So he just had relationship after relationship. So he knew that he's like Sam Muchnick. Probably not as outgoing. Sam was not as outgoing or charismatic as Paul. Paul liked the spotlight. Well, I know when we did commentary, we did it with a stick mic, one stick mic, no headsets, sitting at ringside in two chairs. And then when he wanted me to talk, or he allowed me to talk, he'd lean the mic over toward my mouth. But I could be in the middle of a sentence, and he'd take the mic away because he wanted to talk. It wasn't a great partnership. But I learned a lot from him. He's a smart wrestling guy. Every situation I found myself in might not have been ideal. We may not be having holiday dinner together, but if I can learn something from your ass, I'm taking it. And I learned a lot from Paul Bosch on how to and how not to do some things. But Paul sure was unhappy. Cowboy resurrected Paul's business in that regard. All those Mid-South guys, JY got over, Rock and Roll Express got over huge. It just was, and it was rugged and physical. So it worked out pretty damn good. So I enjoy going to Houston. That's where I discovered Whataburger. I should put a monument on that date or something. But anyway, yeah, it was good.
You wrote in your book, now the way I see it, I continued, is if you were to buy Watts out, you could have yourself a Super Bowl, except you'd own both teams. Crockett's face wasn't telling me much, he wrote. I didn't know if he was interested or not, but I was in now, so I decided to keep going. Quote, you keep your show on TBS and you put UWF on there too. You have your NWA guys win an equal amount and your UWF guys win an equal amount until you cash in once a year with a super show, pitting one league against another. Boy, that sounds like something we've heard before and much later in wrestling. And here you are pitching that idea, and Crockett's response, how much? I expect McMahon will have interest, but we're coming to you first, I said, ignoring his question. How much? Crockett asked again. Bill's $2 million price tag was on the tip of my tongue. $4 million, I said. Crockett nodded. My personal split was going to be 5% of the overall sales price. I brought up the number to give me some room to negotiate. I could see Crockett wanted UWF. He wanted to double his efforts to compete with Vince, and Watts had 120 individual television contracts that would be hugely helpful in that regard. My percentage of a deal would give me room to plan my own next move. I wanted to go home, but I had nothing to go home to. Tell Bill to call me, Crockett said, as he and Garner left the room. Man, look at you. The ball's of steel here. He wants 2. We're going to ask for 4. Let's give ourselves some room. What a meeting, man.
It's called being a businessman, Conrad. That's all.
Yeah.
A lot of fans are so used to seeing me with a black hat on, broadcasting matches. They're unaware of this aspect of my career.
Right.
But it was interesting times, and it was, I wouldn't change a thing.
You wrote, after they left, I waited a respectable amount of time to make sure both men were gone before calling Bill from a payphone. This time I had a calling card and didn't have to call collect as Gene Kaniski did. This was twice what he asked for. And just as importantly to a stubborn, prideful man like Cowboy, this was a respectable way out of the wrestling business. He wouldn't be seen as beaten. He would be seen as someone who sold his company at a price he couldn't walk away from. Bill, I said, as Cowboy answered the phone, and in the middle of an airport terminal in Atlanta, I told the man who brought me into the business that I just sold the company which started my career. This is like a best case scenario for you and Bill at this point, is it not?
We thought so. Yeah, we thought so, Connie. We found a solution. What was it the best solution, Conrad? I don't know. Should we have negotiated? He said Bill and his people negotiated a better price when it come down to the nitty gritty and the nut cutting time. Maybe, but this is how it went down. And I regret the fact that Cowboy did get all his money, because that meant, guess who did get all their money?
You.
Check.
So when you're in there, discussing 4 million, you never write that it came up what you're going to do. What did you think you were going to do? Like, if they're buying your job out, like, did you have an idea of what you would do?
No, but I wasn't worried about it.
Right.
I have skills. I was a successful advertising person. I just built a television network. I got broadcasting experience. So maybe Crockett brings me with him, which he did.
In hindsight, do you think anything would have been different had Watts tried to sell a year earlier? Like if he'd have sold in 86 instead of 87, would that have changed anything for him or the Crockett's?
Might have, because the economy kept getting worse.
Yeah.
So you want to get on the front side of the decline. That might have helped, might have done it. But there's a good chance that what you're suggesting is true.
With the benefit of hindsight, is this one of the biggest achievements in your career? Like to be able to pull this sale off?
You know what? I've never really thought of it that way. But now that I'm older, with opportunities like this to speak about it, it brings back these memories and the skull sessions and the strategies and the game planning, because it creates those memories. It might be. It's one of the biggest things I've ever done. I can't think of anything administratively
right
that I've ever done that was as impressive as this on hindsight. So, but things just fell into place, I guess. You try to come up again with a solution that's a win-win, and I was successful in accomplishing that. I got my part done and got the hell out, and turned the other stuff over, the heavy lifting, to the guys a lot smarter than me. So, but I guess it is kind of. I never looked at it that way. So, but maybe so. I'm not downplaying it all shucks or something, but putting it in your terms, it may be. I can't think of anything that was more significant in the big picture overhaul and how all those things. I look on Peacock and see tons of material that I was on back in the day. So it's provided content, yes. Everlasting content, and it's a unique commodity. It has value, and for those things, I'm very proud.
Well, I was proud to actually get to sit down with Jimmy Crockett before he passed away. I can't believe we were fortunate enough to be able to do this, but we were, and we've got a clip that we want to play here because we did discuss this UWF sale and acquisition with him. And I want to give some context at the end, but we've got a clip here that runs, 5 or 6 minutes. Anytime you want to pause it, we can just holler and we will, or we can just recap it at the end and let you respond to it. But we've got a few minutes here that I thought was important for us to have this discussion. So without further ado, here's a clip from Conversations with Conrad, which is a part of the full interview series that we have over at adfreeshows.com. So if you like what you hear here, we have hours and hours of conversation with Mr. Crockett. Here's a few minutes from Conversations with Conrad on adfreeshows.com.
My TV guy, Rob Garner, said with that loss of syndication, that puts us over the magic number for national buys.
It was 100, right? Because that would have put you at 110, I believe.
Well, whatever it was,
yeah, it
was the magic number. That's what the carrot was for us.
I see.
And it worked, but we never got the money. So, it was one of those. It was a good decision and a bad decision.
Do you remember if they offered a price up front or what the negotiation process looked like?
Oh, they wanted all this money up front because they'd heard that Vince got $1 million. And no, it was like, no, you're going to get a percentage of what happens. And that's the way it ended up.
What sort of due diligence, if any, did you do going into that deal?
Well, verifying they had the TV shows on.
Right.
What is syndication? They did check that, and the important stations that we needed to make sure the program stayed on was verified, but that was about it. Because we weren't going to run Lafayette, Louisiana anytime soon.
Is it true that Jim Ross made sure he carved a deal out for himself as well?
I'm just,
Allegedly, he not only got a piece of whatever Watts received, but he also negotiated that he would be one of your lead announcers.
yeah, I mean, he was going to be my lead, one of our announcers.
Mhm.
I mean, he's a good announcer. Why wouldn't I? I mean,
Of course. How was Watts to deal with when you're putting this deal
pain in
together?
the ass.
Okay. Can you tell us anything about that?
No, just he was difficult to deal with at best, and then just
Were you getting the vibe from Watts or JR when you would get to these sort of difficult parts of the conversation? Well, if you don't want it, Vince will take it.
that never came up because I don't think it really was there.
Okay.
I mean, Vince didn't need either one of us, to tell you the truth.
Right. Yeah. At the time, he had over 200 syndicated stations
I mean,
himself.
he wasn't buying anything at that point. He was taking.
I see. I think the argument would be you could have just taken it too. Do you feel like in hindsight it was a bad deal in that regard?
I was in a hurry to get to that magic number,
Right.
and that was the only way to get there in a hurry. I was at the attrition of talent over a period of time. Oh, in 2 years we might be able to have that many in syndication. We weren't going to be there in 2 years.
So you felt like the clock was ticking.
Oh yeah.
Do you feel that way right after WrestleMania? I ask because this deal closes 10 days later. So it feels like A, it could be a reaction to WrestleMania. B, it could be a little ego of, I don't want Vince to lap me here in our race. And C, to your point, you need those magic number of stations.
Well, we needed the magic number, and we weren't going to make it going the speed we were going. And Vince, he's going to have all the talent he wanted.
Let's talk about the details of the deal. Do you recall what you originally agreed to pay and ultimately what you wound up paying Watts?
Well, I don't remember what we agreed to, but he got very little out of it in the long run. I know that because he was screaming.
Let's talk about that. What was the state of their affairs once you really got under the hood? Once you bought it?
It was a shambles. I mean, you made the statement they didn't have long to live, and they didn't. And that's what we bought, something that wasn't working.
Not only do you inherit their business, you inherit their past due TV bills too, right?
We didn't pay them.
Okay.
Yeah, we inherited them, but no, go call him.
Yeah.
And we lost a few stations, but we got to the magic number.
At any point, once you actually get your hands on the thing, did you feel like Watts or Ross had misled you?
I don't think they misled me. I think my expectations maybe were unrealistic, but I don't think they misled me.
Did you and your brother differ on that? I feel like David still has some hard feelings about that deal.
Yeah, I think David was more into the TV production and all, and I think when he got a hold of what Watts was doing, it's like, this is a piece of shit. And so it's, from his standpoint, I could see how he said, this ain't what we thought we were getting.
Was his relationship with JR strained as a result?
Probably.
But you and JR were fine.
JR, to my face, never has said or done anything for me to say anything bad about JR.
Right.
I mean, when he came to work for us, he worked hard and he did a good job.
What do you think of those remarks from Mr. Crockett about the way the deal went down and the way he viewed your role and all that?
Well, he was being truthful. I appreciate the nice things he said about me. I always like working with Jimmy. he was easy to approach, but you know, the thing it's funny about pro wrestling sometimes, Conrad, infrastructures is something that Vince and his company have mastered. For example, you know, AEW is still, we're growing, new people every day, seems like. So, but you got to have an infrastructure. You got to have checks and balances. You got to have good people positioned in key roles and allow them to do their job, man. So I think that was part of the issue. In other words, I'm trying to say is that Crockett's make this huge purchase, but I don't know if they had a meeting ever to talk about organization.
Right.
Who's going to do this? Who's going to do that? You know, the key thing about wrestling is and always will be the booking. And so, you know, I think Jimmy perceived that Dusty would just proceed as usual, doing all the booking, he and JJ. And that needed some freshness. That needed new ideas and new input. And it didn't happen. And that was a problem.
Mr. Crockett would go on to say they were spread too thin management wise and couldn't take advantage of a lot of the good things from this deal. It was the beginning of the end for Crockett here. Vince's business is going to get stronger and stronger. It just gets away from Crockett. WrestleMania 3, as you heard, sort of, had everybody trying to figure out what in the world are we going to do to compete with this. And he even said, you know, if Mania wasn't such a huge success, he may not have gone through with this purchase, but nobody really would have known. But I brought up the question about David because I know that you guys all got together for the first time in a long time at Starcast rather, in Baltimore in 2019. I think it was your first, I think it was one of your first times seeing them in a long, long time. And you guys, the three of y'all took a picture together before our shows that day. And
I'm proud of that picture. And I'm glad that we're all there together. And David and I, if there was animosity or bad feelings, they're no longer.
No.
And we get along great. And I'm happy for that. I'm proud of that we were past that shit. We got past the wrestling stuff. Pro wrestling's wrought with this kind of deal. It's jealousy, insecurities, all kinds of stuff. And I say that it's probably no different in a lot of businesses. But pro wrestling certainly has its share of paranoia and uncertainties.
What I find interesting is, for whatever reason, I think Mr. David Crockett had a little hard feelings towards you about the way this deal went down. But in reality, he was upset with his brother because he felt like, hey, we don't have to buy Watts Territory out. If we just wait, they're going to go out of business on their own. And then we can go pick up those TV stations. But his brother Jimmy felt like this was necessary. He loved your vision. He saw your vision. They took a stab at it. And of course it didn't work. But at that point, it feels like Vince and his global expansion was inevitable. I don't know that anything could have worked. And I'll tell you what does work, and that's AG1. That's why you and I start with one delicious scoop every single day. They've been a long-time sponsor here on the program because it really works. I've actually been doing it since the beginning of the pandemic, so almost 4 years now. But my wife's been on this train even longer than me. She believes that AG1 is the foundational nutritional supplement that supports our body's universal need for gut optimization, stress management, and immune support. And they've continually refined their formula since 2010, trying to find a better baseline or a better way to elevate your baseline health. You see, not only will you replace your multivitamin with AG1, but every scoop also has prebiotics and probiotics and digestive enzymes for your gut support. They've also got magnesium and B vitamins for energy support. How about the adaptogens that your body needs to handle stress levels better? And how about a little vitamin C and zinc to better support your immune system? I recommend AG1 to all my friends and family because I know it's based on the latest science and they've maintained a really high quality standard. In fact, it's tested for like 950 different contaminants. And even my parents have started drinking AG1. My dad feels like he's more productive at the office. I had the same experience. I don't have that afternoon crash anymore. And my wife feels much more productive at the gym. AG1, man, as my grandmother used to say, is good for what ails you. And it's the supplement I trust to provide my body with the daily needs. And that's why we've been partnering for so long. JR has this as a part of his regular routine, and you should too. If you want to take ownership of your health, it starts with AG1. Try AG1 and get a free 1-year supply of vitamin D3K2 and 5 free AG1 travel packs with your first purchase. Just go to drinkag1.com. That's drinkag1.com. Check it out.
Good stuff. It's good stuff, folks. Make you feel better. Easy to do every day. It's painless.
drinkag1.com/JR. So listen, we know that ultimately one of the things the Crockett's are going to try to do is this invasion angle of sorts. I mean, they have that opportunity. They've got 2 brands here. They do try to pay it off with Starrcade 87, but that's the first Starrcade that's not in Greensboro or Atlanta. It's in Chicago, and Vince is going to sabotage it. Man, 1987, for better or worse, was Vince McMahon's year, was it not?
Yeah, out-strategized everybody, outmaneuvered people. Always one step ahead. And he flexed his muscles.
Michael Eldridge had a great question. He wants to know, hypothetically, had the UWF not been sold to JCP, do you think you would have eventually explored other wrestling promotions or just left the business altogether?
I probably would never leave the business altogether. Goodness gracious, that sounds pretty drastic for someone who's made his life in pro wrestling, which can be a blessing or a curse, quite frankly. So, no, I wouldn't have left wrestling, but I would have, there's always it's not like there's a ton of great play-by-play announcers in pro wrestling. You can name them on a hand,
right?
Traditionally. And, I want to be one of those guys, and you get to be one of those guys on that level, then you generally stay employed.
Charlie wants to know, Bruce has mentioned if Vince had purchased the UWF instead of Crockett, Eddie Gilbert would have been the best pickup in the acquisition. And Charlie wants to know, what do you think Hot Stuff brought to the table on both sides of the camera?
Lots of ideas, freshness, contemporary thinking forward, very creative, lifelong fan, student of the game, 3rd generation kid. Sometimes I could tell you that I thought he liked the business or loved the business too much. Very passionate about it. And there's nothing wrong with being passionate about your vocation or your job, but you got to have balance. And he had wrestling, and which eventually I think helped contribute to his premature death with drugs and alcohol.
Mr. Gonzalez wants to know, with the benefit of hindsight, was Sting the most important pickup from the UWF?
Without a doubt. Yeah, without a doubt. Long lasting. My God, we talked earlier that, if you want to go see Sting's last match in Greensboro, you better get a ticket now because the damn thing's going to sell out. There's well over 12,000 tickets out there. So it's done us amazingly well. So, yeah, check that out. So, but Sting, that would be now there are other great talents, don't get me wrong, but Sting was separated from the pack.
We know he's going to go on to become the top guy in WCW. Mm-hmm. Seth Hicks would write, though, if Magnum TA had not had the accident, do you think Sting would have been as popular as he was?
Absolutely. Sting's going to get over. He had it.
Yes.
You can't discount it. You can't replace it. You can't manufacture it. You either have it or you don't. Sting had it in capital letters. I can imagine if Terry Allen had not had his accident, the matches that Sting and Magnum TA would have had. That's an attraction. Even though it may be 2 baby faces, so what? It's 2 major stars competing for something that they both are seeking in a major, highly focused match. So, Sting's popularity was not going to be detailed by anybody or derailed by anybody.
Ari wants to know, why did Jim Crockett need to buy the UWF from Watts? Cable was going to make syndication irrelevant, and it completely overextended JCP to the point where Bill Watts didn't get the money. Well, that's easy to say with the benefit of hindsight, but nobody really knew any of that at the time, right, Jim?
Exactly. Yeah. Hindsight's 2020.
Yeah.
And we weren't in a 2020 position at that time, visionary wise.
Interesting question here from Simple Feller. He wants to know, did they, talking about Jimmy, ask Flair or other talents for their thoughts on the acquisition? Who told Flair and the other talent? I've heard about this meeting. Bruce has talked about this meeting before. What can you tell us about the big meeting where everyone finds out about the big news?
I didn't attend. It ended up just like I thought it would. Paranoia runs deep in my heart. It will seep. Starts when you're always afraid. Step out of line, the man takes you away. It's just going to run. It's like a fungus. You know, how are you going to do TV time? How are you going to do finishes? What we're going to do? Are you going to book us for those guys? Instead of uniting everybody, there stayed that little divide. And the divide is fine if you manage it. This divide wasn't managed very well. And it was us against them type thing. And that's exactly what you do not want, us versus them.
Well, we hope for sure that you guys have had fun today and appreciated Jim's story about the whole acquisition, how Jim Crockett Promotions bought out Bill Watts UWF. Did we cover it completely? Is there anything we missed? Is there any stone that was unturned, Mr. Ross?
No, I think we did a pretty fair job there, Conrad. Thanks for your efforts and Mr. Sabato's notes, even though I didn't look at them. I looked at them earlier, not today. I didn't while we were recording because everything just came back.
Yeah.
But I downplay it. Maybe now that I'm older and, you know, I've seen more sunrises than I have left, I would say looking back, it's one of the more exciting times of my life. And I didn't give myself credit, or that sounds egotistical as shit. I never really thought of it in grandiose terms.
I get it.
I'm just being honest with you. So anyway, but I enjoyed it. It was a good ride back in memory lane. If the fans enjoyed it, maybe learned a couple of things, you know, but we're always going to tell you the truth as best I remember it. So remember, I'm 71.
Well,
my birthday's January 3rd. Cash accepted. No, I'm kidding.
Well, you know what? I don't know what to get you this year. Normally for the past few years, I've had a nice bottle of some liquid courage delivered, but
correct.
Since you're off the sauce, you're harder to buy for this year.
Diet Mountain Dew. I'm a Diet Mountain Dew right now, guy. Boy, I've reduced that sugar intake. It's amazing the weight that comes off when you eliminate sugars and control your carb intake. Amazing. Dieting. So, and insulin and my diabetes medicine. So anyway, goddamn, I looked at my counter this morning. I look like a pharmacy. So I got to get past all this shit and get rid of some of these scripts and live happily ever after.
Yes, you will. And we are excited that we get to talk about another happily ever after next week, the evolution of the Undertaker. You first started to work with him as Mean Mark Callis. And then of course we're introduced to the Dead Man, and he becomes a top guy, a locker room leader, the American badass, and all of that conversation at a high level coming to you next week here on Grilling JR. In the meantime,
the Clint Eastwood, Conrad, Undertaker is the Clint Eastwood of pro wrestling.
Amen to that.
Commands more respect and with as little things said as he needs to. He's been talking more in the later years. He's got a one-man show. I hear it's very good. But he's a class act. We got great stories about him. I can't wait to talk about the Clint Eastwood of pro wrestling next week.
Happening next week right here on Grilling JR. If you've got a question about the Undertaker and the evolution of the Dead Man, you can ask it on social media. That's easy to do. It's at JR Grilling on Twitter and Instagram, Grilling JR over on Facebook. And, yeah, that's it, man. We appreciate all you guys tuning in today. Thanks for taking a roll down memory lane today here with us as we went all the way back to 1987, and we'll be back next week. Hopefully in between now and then, you guys have a great Christmas, and we'll see you to make sure that you have a happy new year, Jim.
Absolutely. And don't forget the big pay-per-view on December 30th from Long Island. Samoa Joe and MJF one-on-one, finally. Should be very interesting to see how that match is structured. Because Joe's going to bring it no matter the outcome. And it's going to be interesting to see how the smaller, yet very, very talented champion reacts, where they structure these matches. And here's how this is put together. I'm interested in strategies. And these guys, I think, will have a great match. I think they will exceed expectations. Pay-per-view, December 30th.
Tickets are on sale now if you're in the Long Island area, AEWTIX.com. That's AEWTIX.com. And we'll see you sooner rather than later, right here on Grilling JR, the voice of wrestling, Mr. Jim Ross.
Happy holidays, everybody, and thanks for everything.
Ready for some great news during the holidays? Just last week, interest rates fell lower than they've been in months. This could be your chance to finally pay off all of your high interest rate credit cards and lower your monthly payments by $500, $600, $700, even $800 a month. And how much can you save? It's free to find out right now at SaveWithConrad.com. And you don't need perfect credit or money out of your pocket. And you even get to skip your next 2 house payments at SaveWithConrad.com. Hey, it's Conrad Thompson here to tell you a little more about what AdFreeShows.com is all about. Get early, ad-free access to more than a dozen of your favorite wrestling podcasts every single week, starting at just $9. That's less than 20 cents an episode each month. And yes, you can listen to them all directly through Apple Podcasts or your regular podcast apps. How easy is that? Ad-free shows also has thousands of hours worth of bonus content and docuseries like Title Chase, Eric Fires Back, Conversations with Conrad, and The Insiders. Plus new series like The Book with David Crockett, Monday Mailbags with Mike Chioda and Nick Patrick, and a whole lot more. And you want to talk about early? You can't get any earlier than listening to the shows live. You can be a part of the live studio audience as we record the podcast. Plus, ride shotgun alongside your favorite childhood heroes for live watch-alongs, Q&As, and other interactive experiences every single month. Come on now, see for yourself what thousands of other wrestling fans from around the world have discovered, that AdFreeShows.com is the best value in wrestling. Check it out today, and hey, when you do, the first week is completely free. AdFreeShows.com.